Say goodbye to your credit card rewards. Greedy corporate mega stores led by Walmart and Target are pushing for a law in Congress to take away your hard-earned cash back and travel points to line their pockets. The Durbin-Marshall credit card bill would enact harmful credit card routing mandates that would end credit card rewards as we know it. If you love your credit card rewards, tell your lawmakers, hands off my rewards. Tell them to oppose the Durbin-Marshall credit card bill.
Hello, you're listening to On Israel, Al Monitor's podcast from Tel Aviv. This is Ben Caspit. The power couple that brought joy to millions of Americans and Israelis broke up last week when Donald Trump walked out of the White House and Joe Biden walked in. Benjamin Netanyahu lost his ally, his patron, and greatest benefactor, and will now have to adjust to a new and more complex reality. American liberals are breathing a sigh of relief at having emerged from darkness into light after 4 years in which many of their nightmares came true. Will their brethren in Israel enjoy the same sense of salvation on the 23rd of March? And what about American Jews? 70% of them voted for Biden against Trump, while more than 70% of Israeli Jews unreservedly supported the president who couldn't stop lavishing love and gifts on them. How will the change in administration affect American Jewry and its relationship with Israel? Our guest today is well versed in such issues. He is familiar with American politics and its corridors of power, as well as with Israel's bizarre political arena and the increasingly troubled relationship between Israel and American Jewry. Dani Dayan was head of the Judean Samaria Settlements Council for 6 years and one of its most prominent faces. He is a West Bank settler himself and a right-wing ideologue. He was a staunch supporter of the Likud and Benjamin Netanyahu, who rewarded him in 2016 by appointing him as Israel's Consul General to the largest Jewish city in the world, New York. But earlier this month, Dayan broke ranks and joined Gideon Sa'ar's New Hope party, challenging Netanyahu in a bitter fight for his political life or death. Dani Dayan will be with us right after this short commercial break.
If you're listening to this podcast, you obviously care about the Middle East, and if you do, you should probably be reading Al Monitor. Al Monitor is a global newsroom headquartered in Washington, D.C., with a network of over 160 contributors around the world. Al Monitor offers first-class reporting and analysis from a range of perspectives and an approach that represents the highest journalistic standards, as well as an award-winning commitment to press freedom and independence. If you haven't done so already, visit us at almonitor.com, check out our articles, and sign up for our free newsletters. There's a lot to choose from, including the Week in Review, an essay that offers unusual insights and forecasts into the region based upon Al Monitor's outstanding reporting. And if you haven't done so, please subscribe to our Al Monitor podcast on your favorite podcast platform, on Israel with Ben Caspit, and on the Middle East with me, Andrew Parasolidi.
Shalom, Ambassador Dani Dayan, and thank you for joining Al Monitor's On Israel podcast. Shalom, Dani.
Shalom, Ben. Thank you for having me.
Okay, let's dive to the very important issues we have to speak about. I'm sure you too are grateful to former President Trump for all the gifts he showered on Israel, such as recognition of Jerusalem and the Golan Heights, etc. I'm curious to know how you felt when you saw the events at the Capitol on January 6th.
Well, obviously, I felt very bad. I felt outraged. I felt very sad for the United States of America and its democracy, and institutions, its glorious institutions. But you know, Ben, it's part of the paradox. It's part of the conflict that existed the entire 4 years of President Donald J. Trump. On one hand, we cannot and we should not deny that he was a diplomatic miracle for the state of Israel. The thing that you call them gifts, I would say the political, the diplomatic dividends that Israel received from that presidency are beyond any wildest imagination, from Jerusalem to the Golan Heights to the legality of the Israeli communities in Judea and Samaria, the withdrawal from the bad JCPOA with Iran, and the Abraham Accords, and even, I would say, the elimination of one of the most evil persons in the Middle East, Qasem Soleimani. So the dividends were beyond any imagination. On the other hand, and we shouldn't deny that too, he was a car wreck for American democracy. Not only for American democracy, for the the civility of the political discourse in America, he was a disaster. So yeah, that is the paradox with which we lived those 4 years. And both sides of that paradox, of that contradiction, are similarly genuine, are similarly true.
Yes, I think the expression mixed emotions is very precise in this issue. And now we are the spoiled child that just had 4 years bar mitzvah trip. And I want to ask you, how do you think Israel can adjust to the change from Trump to Biden and overcome the major hangover it experienced after parting with Trump, or actually how will it deal with the inevitable withdrawal symptoms of the addiction to Trump?
Well, it will be different. No doubt it will be different, a completely different administration. But, when I see the Biden-Harris administration, and I believe this is the way Israel should look at it, not so much, not at all actually, as a crisis, but as an opportunity. I think we had one more opportunity to amend, to repair our relations with the Democratic Party. And if I look, at the gallery of candidates that the Democratic Party presented in its primaries elections for president, I think that the Biden-Harris ticket is the best Democratic ticket we could expect regarding Israel. I think that Joe Biden has really a love for Israel, I would say, from his guts. There are persons that say that the Biden administration will be a third Barack Obama administration. I think that's completely wrong. I would say that it would be more accurate to define it, to describe it as a third Bill Clinton administration. I see much more similarity between Joe Biden in general and regarding Israel in particular. I see much more similarity between Joe Biden and Bill Clinton than between Joe Biden and the president he served for 8 years as his very loyal vice president, Barack Obama. So we have to understand it will be different, but it will not be at all a disaster if we know how to work with the Biden administration, obviously.
I think it's a brilliant comparison. I used to be in the United States to serve as Ma'ariv's New York bureau chief when Clinton appeared on 1991, and people forgot, Dani, that although he was a Democrat, Bill Clinton was a very popular American president in Israel. The Israelis loved him, and I hope very much that you are right. But let's go into resolutions, dive into the details. Let's talk about the Iranian issue, because while I agree with you that Biden is a true Israel supporter and he declared himself as a Zionist, I think Israel is extremely worried about the Iranian issue. The fact that most of the Obama people involved in negotiating the nuclear deal have been reappointed to senior positions raises concerns that Biden will simply just go back to the original deal without taking advantage of the levers and advantages achieved by the Trump's maximum pressure policy. Do you share these concerns?
To a certain extent. Look, first of all, I believe that the Iranian issue, the Iranian file, will be the only Middle Eastern issue or the only issue regarding Israel that President Biden will tackle in 2021. I don't think that, I believe that all other issues will be relegated to the future, if at all. But the Iranian issue is urgent because the clock is ticking and he would like to prevent any friction that can become even a military friction in the Middle East. So he will have to deal with that. Now, look, the question is a question of expectations. If the expectation is that President Biden will declare tomorrow morning that he doesn't intend to rejoin the JCPOA, then we will be disappointed. But that is not my expectation. My expectation is that, as with any other democratic president, I mean, there was no differences of opinion on that in the democratic debates. Any American, even Democratic president, will strive to rejoin the JCPOA. Now, what should be Israel's strategy or tactic? Israel's strategy should be to convince the administration, and I believe it will be a quite easy task, to diplomatically convince the administration that they have to negotiate toughly a return to the JCPOA, not to return to the JCPOA as is, but to start a very tough negotiation in which some clauses, especially the sunset clauses, but not only them, will be changed. They will be adapted to the new reality and to the calendar. And the second thing, to expand the scope of the JCPOA, including in ballistic missiles, the spread of terrorism in the area, etc., etc. I think that is an achievable goal. I was very encouraged by the things that Secretary of State or nominated Secretary of State Blinken said in Congress, in the Senate, in his confirmation hearing. Even also Avril Haines, the Director of National Intelligence, said similar things. So I am quite encouraged that we can achieve that. By the way, it doesn't contradict the traditional policy of Prime Minister Netanyahu of fix it or nix it. I don't think we can expect a Biden administration to nix it, so we should work with this Biden administration to fix it.
Let's talk about something you just mentioned a few minutes ago, and I think you're a very good expert in this issue as Israel's former Consul General in New York. And I wanted to ask you, can Israel, under Netanyahu, heal the rift with the Democratic Party after Netanyahu's total alliance to the Republican in recent years? And maybe also, how do you think the Democrats' progressive wing, which is identified mostly with harsh criticism of Israel, will affect Biden's policy? What should Israel be doing to neutralize the influence of lawmakers such as Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, and other members of the so-called squad?
I was very encouraged by the nominations that President President-elect Biden at that time made for the top cabinet posts. No, I didn't detect in his cabinet nominations even one person not only aligned with Ocasio-Cortez or others, but not even aligned with Bernie Sanders and not even aligned with Elizabeth Warren. All his nominations for the top cabinet posts were mainstream Democrats. And that is very encouraging. I think that President Biden made a clear decision to face the center of the American political spectrum, to try to work with the moderate Republicans and with moderate Democrats at the expense of the radical Democrats. By the way, in that sense, in debilitating and weakening the radical wing of the Democratic Party, I believe that Israel and Biden have a common interest, and probably in some ways we will cooperate even implicitly on that. But the question that you raised, Ben, is very serious. Yes, unfortunately, Israel, the Prime Minister, the embassy in Washington, are perceived as almost carrying a Republican Party membership card for the last at least 12 years. And that is the problem. I am a big believer in the vitality for Israel to be bipartisan. And look, we have to work with Democrats, to outreach to them, to have a constant dialogue. I did it in New York. I think that for every Republican that I met in New York and the other areas I covered, I met 5 or 6 Democrats. I had excellent relations with them. I must say that it's not enough to expect the Democratic Party and the Democrats to understand Israel. We have to make an effort to understand the new Democratic Party, and I'm not sure we do. I will explain briefly what I mean. In order to understand, to connect with the new Democratic Party and the new democratic ideology, is not enough to, to remember Martin Luther King Day, or to say something about, to pay lip service to LGBTQ rights. It's much more than that. We have to really try to understand the new African-American narrative of systemic racism is something that Israelis, I'm afraid, do not understand. We have to strive to understand the Latino, the American Latino way of thinking about immigration, that there is an illegal person, but there is only an undocumented person. All those things are things that we should work hard to internalize. First of all, the Israeli diplomats, the Israeli politicians, decision makers, and we have to understand the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party in 2021 is not anymore just about the American dream and some grains of social justice. It's something completely different that I am afraid most Israelis, including most Israeli decision makers, do not understand. And the last thing that we have to do, and we will talk about that, I believe, in a minute, is to reconnect with liberal Jews.
This is exactly my next question. By the way, this was a very interesting, thorough analysis from you right now. And I want to speak with you about another issue that I know is very close to your heart, the relationship between Netanyahu's right-wing conservative Israel and American Jewry. This is an issue close to you, and it's not a secret that under Netanyahu, a worrying gap has opened up between Reformed and conservative Jews and the Israeli establishment. Can this gap be bridged?
Well, Ben, I will give you a scoop. I had very harsh, difficult arguments with the Prime Minister regarding the American Jewry. I think that the Prime Minister Netanyahu lost his belief on the future of the non-Orthodox Jewish community, and I think that there is nothing more wrong than that. My belief is that the relationship between Israel and the world Jewry is not a commercial transaction. We give them, they give us money and political support, and we give them, I don't know, pride or a refuge in the day, a shelter in day of need, etc. We can't see that as a commercial transaction. That it is, if it's not good enough, we make a deal with the evangelicals. We have to see the relation in a completely different level. But it's easy, and I do blame the government, but it's not only the government. I think that the Israeli society in general is completely indifferent to the world jury, to the American jury. Is not an issue that the average Israeli cares about at all. I always love to quote my political mentor, Menachem Begin, in one of his speeches as far as 1948, he said, the Mediterranean Sea, the sea is not the border of our people. We have brothers not only all over the world, and we should educate Israelis. And they feel, the American Jews feel that there is a kind of indifference from the politicians in Israel, but also from the general society. And that creates a very serious problem that enlarges all the problems. When there is a crisis, the crisis is blown up because of the feeling of indifference.
I plan now to move to the domestic Israeli politics, but I have to follow up on this so important issue. People and Israelis that live in the United States, they fear that we are losing the new generation of American Jews. I'm talking, of course, about the non-Orthodox Jews, the millennials, the young Jews in the United States, that most of them never visited Israel. We are 80 years from the Holocaust now. We cannot use it anymore as a tool to get us closer. And maybe, do you imagine a possibility that the vast majority, the Democratic voters, the Democratic Jewish voters who are 70% of the American Jewry, will just lose interest in Israel, in the only Jewish state on earth?
Look, right now, Ben, this is not the situation. The American Jewish community is closely attached to the state of Israel. I saw it so many times. I saw the Israeli flag in every single shul, in every single synagogue across the United States, Reform, Conservative, Modern Orthodox. I will never forget in my entire life the Shabbat, the Saturday, immediately following the massacre in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. 1 week later, the entire community gathered in Rodef Shalom Synagogue in Pittsburgh, a very long service, a Reform synagogue, a very long service with speeches and with songs. I think it was 4 or 5 hours, the service. And it ended with, I don't know if it was spontaneous or not, but it doesn't matter. It ended with one anthem, and that anthem was Atikva. So they are very attached to Israel. But yes, we have a problem with the younger generation. As I said, part of it is because Israel doesn't invest at all in that, and the other reason, which is the crisis of American Jewish education. I think that the most acute crisis of the American Jewry is the crisis of the American Jewish education, which is tremendously expensive, and doesn't allow for many youngers to get a proper Jewish education. Jewish, I mean, not necessarily religious education. But, Ben, I will sum it up this way. What really, I'm not so bothered about the next week crisis with the American Jewry. And I'm not so worried about the headline in Al Monitor or in Forward about the crisis, this crisis or that crisis, conversion, Kotel, etc., etc. What really keeps me literally awake at night sometimes is what will be written in the Jewish history book that will be written 70 or 80 years from now. I am scared, I am really afraid that we will read in that book that during the 21st century, the Jewish people split into two unconnected tribes, or worse than that, that a very large tribe, we lost it. And I think that is the responsibility of the state of Israel to prevent that. And I don't see that the state of Israel does what it should do in that respect.
So I hope you will be able to influence after the election through the post you'll get or not get in the new government, because it is important to all of us, not only to right wingers or lefties, and to all of us. And I'm a partner to your feelings here. And let's move to the domestic issue in Israel. As soon as you announced you were going or joining Gideon Sa'ar, you were immediately accused of treason against the Likud. So I wanted to ask you, why did you go with Gideon Sa'ar? And do you think Gideon Sa'ar is ready for this incredibly complex job of Israeli prime minister? And will he know how to square the circle and make the ultra-Orthodox join a government with the anti-clerical parties of Lieberman, Yair Lapid, etc.?
Look, my last month in New York, it was a gradual process. During my last month in New York, and since I returned to Israel, I felt extremely uncomfortable with the way that Benjamin Netanyahu manages the state affairs. I was disappointed, especially by the last government, 36 ministers, 8 deputy ministers, what we call in Israel the Norwegian law that added even more unnecessary Knesset members to the parliament. And then the fact that, in cold blood, Netanyahu decided something that is really inconceivable, and not to legislate the state budget, something that really I couldn't. And above all, the dividing and the violent discourse that emanated from his office and from his loyalists. That yes, I also feel it now, and my daughter feels it. In harsh insults and things like that, because we dare to join a different party. I know the moment Gideon Sa'ar announced that he's forming his new party, New Hope for Israel, I knew immediately, first of all, that I at last have a party, I have for whom to vote. I felt completely disappointed from Likud, that I knew that I cannot vote for it. But for instance, in the previous election, I didn't think that Benny Gantz is the proper person to replace it, the capable person to replace Netanyahu. The moment Gideon Sa'ar declared his candidacy, I knew that I have found the person I want to be the next prime minister of Israel. Then when Gideon Sa'ar, whom I know more than 30 years, called me and asked me to join the list of candidates, I agreed. I thought it was my responsibility to contribute my share. Yes, I know Gideon Sa'ar for 35 years, since he was a teenager. I know that he has an incredible intellectual capabilities. He has a quiet leadership. He has the ability to make decisions. And finally, last but definitely not least, he has a personal and moral integrity that is very needed. So yes, I believe he has all the qualifications to be an extremely good Prime Minister of Israel.
So my final question to you today, Ambassador Dani Dayan, is actually, in fact, what's the difference between Netanyahu's Likud and Sa'ar's New Hope? Victor Lieberman, for example, said that replacing Netanyahu with Gideon Sa'ar is not enough. The entire regime has to be changed. And for example, the ultra-Orthodox must be distanced from positions of influence in order to save them from themselves, etc. Gideon Sa'ar as a prime minister, what will be the acute change between him and what we see now from Netanyahu?
Well, first of all, I think that Netanyahu isn't able to form a government. So New Hope, that's the reason we go to a new round of elections, a fourth round of election in less than 2 years. That's exactly the reason. And that nothing has changed in that respect. I think that Gideon Sa'ar will be able to form, it's the only person that is able to form a stable coalition. And by the way, he will have, in my opinion, several options for at least two options for coalitions, not necessarily the coalition that Avigdor Lieberman referred to. All the parties that were in the past members of Netanyahu's coalitions, including Lapid and others, are candidates for Gideon Sa'ar's coalition. But I think that I would say two very important things that make the difference between New Hope and the current Likud. First of all, Menachem Begin always referred to his party as a National Liberal Party. We are a National Liberal Party. Likud has forgotten what liberal means. And also the way that Netanyahu corrupted the Israeli politics, making it a politics, first of all, of personal interests, a politics of harsh words and insults and division. We will change that. We will change that. We are loyal to, it's what Zev Jabotinsky called Hadar, which is a kind of gentlemanship that we are all committed to. So I think that Gideon Sa'ar government will bring a new political culture, a cleaner politics to the state of Israel, a politics of unity and not of division, like Likud and Netanyahu have done during the last years.
And all of this will be decided on March 23rd. Ambassador Dani Dayan, it was very interesting. I thank you very much for joining us. We will go now to another very short break, and we'll be back soon with some final thoughts. Thank you, Dani. Toda v'shalom.
Thank you, Ben.
I'm Andrew Parasolidi, president of the award-winning media news site El Monitor, where we cover the Middle East with some of the best reporters and columnists anywhere. And I'm excited to announce our new podcast on the Middle East, where each week I will interview newsmakers from the U.S. and the region about the latest news and trends with additional commentary from our on-the-ground correspondents. Those of you who follow the region know that what happens in the Middle East doesn't stay in the Middle East. And to cite another great movie line, every time the U.S. tries to get out, the region pulls us back. Your time is valuable, so let me promise you this. You will learn something and you will never be bored, because each week we'll be talking with and listening to those leaders who are making the news and shaping the trends in this critical and fascinating region. So please subscribe to On the Middle East with me, Andrew Parasolidi.
Thank you for staying with us. In my opinion, one of the most interesting parts of this talk with Ambassador Dani Dayan was when we dealt and spoke about the widening gap between Israel and liberal Jews in the United States. Ambassador Dayan told us about a series of harsh, difficult arguments that he had with Prime Minister Netanyahu. According to Dayan, Netanyahu lost his belief in the future of the non-Orthodox Jews in the United States. This is a huge headline. For decades, this American Jewry, most of the Jews in the United States are not Orthodox, was regarded one of the most important strategic assets of Israel abroad and in its existence, in its very existence. And suddenly the Prime Minister wipes it out of the map. Ambassador Dayan, of course, says that Bibi is wrong, and he believes he's a huge believer in the future of the American Jewry. He's not too worried about the growing influence of the progressive part of the Democratic Party, aka the Squad. And he says, Ambassador Dayan, that he is very encouraged by the most of the President Biden's cabinet fresh nominations that belong to what he calls the mainstream of the Democratic Party. Ambassador Dayan acknowledges that the reality in the last 4 years was that there was an impression that from Prime Minister Netanyahu and South, including Ambassador Dermer here in Washington, Israel actually carried a membership card of the Republican Party, but he thinks this can be fixed. Israel, says Ambassador Dayan, have to try to understand and speak the new language of the new Democratic Party and try to understand the new narrative of this party, and it's possible. Ambassador Dayan has mixed emotions about switching between the Trump administration and the Biden administration. On one hand, he's grateful to whatever President Trump did for the state of Israel. On the other hand, he was deeply shocked when he watched, like all of us, the Capitol Hill under attack and under siege by the Trump supporters. He thinks that Biden will not be a new Barack Obama, but maybe, he hopes, Biden is going to be a new Bill Clinton regarding Israel. And Clinton was one of the most popular American presidents in Israel. So actually, Ambassador Dayan is hopeful. And he also thinks that Gideon Sa'ar, the leader of the party that he just joined, has a very good chance to try and switch and become Israel's next prime minister after the election in March 23rd. He thinks that Sa'ar will bring the same right-wing ideology, but it will be a lot cleaner and more democratic. I hope it was interesting, and I hope to hear from you all here at the same time next Monday on Israel, Al Monitor. I'm Ben Caspit from Tel Aviv. Take care.